Alright, just felt like doing a random hardware vid, so I pulled the old DISPL TV out of the closet, where it's been collecting dust for a few months now. So this is the Micomsoft DISPL TV upscan converter unit. Basically, this is kind of a split off from the XRGB line, you could say. Essentially, what this is an XRGB 2+ without the RGB, but a TV tuner attached. So, yeah. This is probably one of the rarer Micomsoft units. You don't really ever see anybody. I don't know. You don't see these for sale often. You don't really see anyone that really cares about these so much. This is just another piece of thing I just found in a junk shop, and I was like, hey, I know what that is. So I picked it up, and currently don't really have a whole lot of use for it, which is why it's all sealed up in its packaging. But when you find stuff like this for cheap, it usually doesn't come around a second time. So yeah, it's been collecting dust, but thought I'd take a look. So as you can see, it uses the same case as, the XRGB 2, the 2+. To be honest, I don't remember exactly when this came out. I think it was between the 2 and the 2+, somewhere around that time. But either way, technically this is basically an XRGB 2+ without the RGB and without the scan lines either. As you can see, it has a coaxial connector because it's basically, a TV tuner. This was pretty much designed for, your typical Japanese person living in a tiny Tokyo apartment that wants to have a nice desktop computer but doesn't have room for both a monitor and a TV. So they could use this to hook up their TV to, their computer or monitor, and it does a very nice job of upscaling. Japan is currently in the process of switching to digital TV signals just this year. I think in November we're finally switching over completely. Right now we're kind of dual. Most of the country's digital, but my cheap apartment's actually still analog. So I've tested it with this, and it does a really nice job actually, taking the analog TV signal, and it outputs in 640 by 480 resolution. And my VGA monitor, I gotta say, the picture looks quite a bit nicer on the 2090 Sony. So it does a nice job of upscanning TV. And of course, since you can use it for games or whatever too. It's got a D terminal, which is component. However, like the 2+, it's limited to D1, meaning it'll only do 480i, useless for progressive signal. And on the back, you've got the usual PC in, the VGA out, the coaxial in, as well as S-video and composite. Yeah, this does not actually take RGB, which is the reason that most people tend to, just ignore that this item exists or just even forget about it. Also, why it's not called an XRGB, because the main advantage of using the XRGBs is that they take pure RGB, and this the best you can do is the 480i component. And also in the box, just to show you, the AC adapters in there. And then since it is a fully functioning TV tuner, it's got a fairly extensive remote, which still has the original batteries from like 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago. I don't even remember when this thing came out. But yeah, this is something I just found in a junk shop, and I've never really seen these for sale anywhere, so it was like, oh, they have one? Pick it up in case I ever need it. And then, of course, it comes with the usual cables, like the D terminal, the component RCA, stereo, phono cable, adapter cable for RCA stuff, and then the typical crappy Micomsoft VGA cable, which they work, but I wouldn't recommend using them. They're not that great. Alright, and that's just about everything it comes with. So the unit itself, as a TV tuner, works very well, and you can switch it between both analog and digital TV. It'll work with either. You just go to the menu, and it'll take your old analog, or you can switch to digital. Though, now, to most people, the TV tuner is kind of useless these days, which is probably why, I was able to find this. I doubt many of these were ever sold, really, but the ones that were are probably now getting sold off, just because there's not much use for them anymore, really, because of the, analog TV is going soon, and it will take digital TV, but I believe it only takes it, I forget the specs, I'd have to pull up the manual, but it only accepts something like 525i input, which was, at the time, about as good as you could get. So, of course, modern digital TV tends to be, 720p, 1080i, so, which also, of course, this only outputs in 480p, so this can't take an HD input, and it can't output as high either. So for most people, a TV tuner is pretty much useless. And it doesn't take the RGB signal either, so for most people, yeah, it's a fairly useless unit. But the advantage of that is when these do turn up, they don't sell for a whole lot, though you do not see them often. But if you can find one, it's still a decent upscaler. And it will take, the component, will take the S-video. Of course, since it is a TV, specifically meant for TV, it doesn't have some of the more advanced features of the XRGB lines. There's no scan line simulation in this model. I mean, you can tweak the pictures and the color a little bit, but nothing quite as well as the XRGBs can. But at a low cost, it works pretty well. And of course, there is one reason to get one of these, and this is the reason that I am holding on to this, since I'll know it. And that, of course, is the RF coaxial input. Simply put, this is the only upscan converter I've ever heard of that takes RF. Yes, you can take, it's just standard analog RF. So you can input, so, if you've got, like, for example, an original unmodified Famicom, or like a cassette vision, or a Nintendo TV game, 15.6, Pong machines, whatever. This is, as far as I know, the only device in the world ever created that will actually take the raw RF signal and actually truly upscan it to 480p. And there are tons of cheap little RF to boxes that'll take RF and put them out into like component or whatever, but the majority of those don't really properly upscan. They just kind of stretch it and make it look terrible. But this, just like the older XRGB units, is basically a line doubler, and it will actually take the RF input and line double an RF signal up to 480p, which is, yeah, as far as I've ever heard, this is the only device in the world that will do that. So if you have interest in really old stuff like Pong machines and that kind of crap, this is going to be your best friend in the future. And it's also the main reason that I'm holding on to these. Currently, I don't really have anything that's RF only, so, I'm just saving it for when the time comes, because I'm hoping maybe one day I'll find a cassette vision for a cheap price or something. But, so, yeah, if you have a need to upconvert RF, this is your machine. There are some caveats, though. The thing to remember, of course, is this is a Japanese unit. It's designed for Japanese RF signals. So, like, for example, if you've ever, hooked up an unmodded Famicom through RF to an American TV, you'll notice that, like, Japanese RF channel 4 is like American channel 96 or something like that. And, of course, and that's because of differences in the RF frequencies. And this is, of course, set up for Japanese frequencies only, so you'll be going the other way. So if you were going to use this for something released in the US, it may work, it may not. I mean, I know if you read the instructions, it warns you that this will not work with the Neo Geo. It doesn't like the Neo Geo's output. though why anyone would want to hook a Neo Geo up through RF anyway is beyond me. But other than that, it should work for most Japanese RF signals. So yeah, if you're in the US, maybe not so useful, but for the extreme collector that wants to, pick up some extremely old Japanese RF-only devices, this is your box. It's for most people useless, but which is probably the reason why the Micomsoft didn't bother with RF on any of their other units, only this one. But either way, they exist, they're out there, and they still are a decent little UPS converter. A lot of people, of course, the normal XRGBs are way better, but if you're not the insane perfectionist and you just want a nice, decent upscanner converter, the DISPL TV still works quite well at what it does. It just doesn't have the more advanced features and scan lines and all the fun stuff of the XRGBs. But yeah, these are honestly a fairly hard to find item, but if you ever stumble across one somewhere, well, that's what they are, it's what they do. Any questions, let me know.